One rarely discussed problem in ME-CFS is ocular dysfunction or problems with the eyes. By this I mean the capacity of the eyes to shift attention, to move to a new object, to maintain the visual spotlight on a specific object, or even just a loss of acuity and having more fuzzy vision. In this video I'm going to talk more about my own experience with this problem, but also about some of the research which can help us to make sense of it. And finally, I'll also be talking about my experience using eye exercises, which I have found to help me with this issue. But first, my name is Patrick Usher, and I am author of the book Understanding ME-CFS and Strategies for Healing, in which I break down some of the latest research into ME-CFS and talk about the various treatment strategies that I have tried in order to improve my illness. Links for that book are down below. So over the first few years of developing ME-CFS, I started to notice that I had problems with my eyes. And in particular, that, for example, when I was trying to read a book, my eyes could not track from word to word in a normal way anymore. I was having difficulty with that. And the sense of the visual spotlight, the capacity to actually place your visual attention on an object and keep it there, was also impaired. I couldn't really access it in the ways that I could when I was well. So I was having difficulty reading. This made books and technology quite hard, quite stressful. But I also noticed this would happen in general, just with my capacity to see things in the world, shift attention, and to focus on someone else that I might be talking to. And not just those things, I also noticed that my eyelids were quite tense, and more specifically that they would be the muscles of my eyelids would be contracting and relaxing in a kind of rhythmical way, as if there was this sort of embedded tension there. So those were all problems that I noticed, but I didn't know if this was something to do with ME-CFS or something independent of the illness. However, over time I noticed on patient forums and discussion groups that some people also had these kinds of issues, and then I came across a range of papers which were actually looking into this problem, and I'm going to talk about a few of them here. First of all, I'll just go to my two favourite researchers, Professor Wirth and Scheibenbogen, and in their paper on neurological dysfunction in ME-CFS, they actually refer to a specific issue in the eyes. So they write, disturbances of the pupillary reflex upon prolonged illumination of the pupils were also reported in patients with ME-CFS. And in this case, the quote is actually coming from an ME-CFS specialist called Dr. Amalok Bansal, and so this is his observation from his clinical practice. So Bansal says, two unusual responses were observed that are evident on prolonged illumination of the pupils. The more frequent finding seen in 3/4 of ME-CFS patients is a rhythmic contraction and dilatation of the pupils. The second pattern is a paradoxical dilation of the pupils after an initial contraction. So we'll come back to what Wirth and Scheibenbogen are saying there in a moment, but basically what this is saying is that when the eyes are subjected to illumination like a light, what can be observed is that there is this rhythmical contraction and relaxation of the pupils. And so this would speak to some kind of problem in how the reflexes of the eyes of the pupils are operating. Now, Wirth and Scheibenbogen go on to offer an explanation for this. So they say one should consider the possibility that also other regulatory mechanisms of body and autonomic functions and reflexes, like orthostatic regulation, vascular regulation, thermoregulation, and sleep, are also impaired as a consequence of a reduced cerebral blood flow. This could result in either sluggish responses to sudden changes or the opposite, namely large overshooting swings, unable to find a new stable level of regulation after a disturbance, similar as observed with the pupillary reflex. So for them, this problem in the pupillary reflex is to do with reduced blood perfusion, which is causing a kind of stress or dysfunction in the eyes, and in the reflexes, which in responding to the stress of reduced blood perfusion are kind of becoming these overshooting reactive responses where there will be this unusual contraction within the muscles of the eyes. And I personally wonder if, I haven't had my pupils examined, but I wonder if the kind of rhythmic contraction that I get in the eyelids is a part of this same issue. Before we go on to consider other research, there's a few other points I want to make at this stage, which is I listened to a podcast some while ago with someone who was involved in the use of Berlin cures, the infusion that worked on neutralizing the autoantibodies and improving blood flow in the ME-CFS and Long Covid patient. And that person was actually an ophthalmologist, so an eye specialist. And they noticed, or were able to measure, that after infusion with Berlin cures, patients had an improvement in blood flow to the eye. And so it's quite likely that at least one of the main reasons for these issues in the eyes in ME-CFS is a reduced blood perfusion, meaning that the eyes are just not working as well as they would do under normal circumstances. The second issue that I wanted to mention, and I'd be really curious if anyone else has actually had this problem, I've come across one other ME-CFS patient who talked about this issue, but I noticed that when I'm more ill, when I'm in a crash, that my visual perception of the world actually seems ever so slightly darker. And I would imagine that this is something to do with further worsening of blood perfusion during post-exertional malaise. I've talked to one professor about this, and he said that that would probably be why I perceive the world as being literally slightly darker when I have post-exertional malaise. So I'd be very interested if that's something that you have also experienced as an ME-CFS or Long Covid patient. Okay, so to continue, there was a much more elaborate study looking at the problems with the eyes in ME-CFS patients back in 2013. And that study was by Hutchinson et al. And it was called Patterns of Abnormal Visual Attention in Myalgic Encephalomyelitis. And it looked at 29 ME-CFS patients and 29 controls and got them to do a variety of things. I'm just going to read a write-up of the research from the ME Association, which gives a helpful summary. So the write-up says, in this publication, researchers Dr. Claire Hutchinson and Dr. Steve Badham described the specialized and quite intricate measurements undertaken on 29 ME-CFS patients and 29 matched healthy controls across three specific aspects of vision. A, visual processing speed, divided attention and selective attention. B, spatial cueing, the ability to shift attention. And C, visual search, the ability to locate a target in a field of distractors. And so what they found is that overall, the ME-CFS patients performed worse than healthy people in each of these specific areas. They were less able to selectively attend to a specific target while ignoring other irrelevant information. They were slower when it came to moving their attention to a target, particularly a target appearing at an unexpected location. And they were slower at scanning visual stimuli and more easily affected by distractors during a visual search. Now, that 100% speaks to my own experience with eye issues since becoming ill. I have difficulties shifting attention. I have difficulties maintaining my attention on an object, particularly if there are other distractors present. So this is really interesting to me because it's not an area that's talked about very much, but it seems like the nature of the illness itself actually does cause specific, observable, expected eye dysfunctions. So much so that there's actually a research group right now in Australia which is working on a study to actually see whether these dysfunctional eye movements could form the basis for a diagnostic test of ME-CFS. So let me just show you. This is from Monash University, and this is just a little write-up on their website. Eye movements may be key to chronic fatigue syndrome diagnosis. But basically, this research group led by Joanne Fielding has got a fair bit of money to actually do this study. This person, Professor Fielding, is saying that there's no formal way of actually diagnosing the illness, and what we're trying to do is to generate a unique ME-CFS signature based on characteristic changes to eye movements, a behavioural signature that is specific to the disorder that can be used to help diagnose it and monitor the effects of any treatments. So in other words, not just could this help diagnose the illness, but by actually seeing if the eyes are doing better or worse, you'd be able to have an objective marker for how someone is responding to treatments. So, as the old saying goes, the eyes are the window to the soul, but perhaps in ME-CFS, the eyes are the window to understanding the illness. Finally, I will just share that I have also done, at times, not recently, but before, I have done, for extended periods, eye exercises in order to try and improve my problems with my eyes. I've used exercises from a book by Dean Liguri called Vision Therapy, Exercise Your Eyes and Improve Your Eyesight. And these would be things to improve your tracking, to improve your focusing muscles. And I have found that when I practice these exercises, within a week or so, my capacity to, for example, read becomes profoundly better. I've had times where I would struggle to read one page in a book, but if I practice these exercises for 4 or 5 days, I can suddenly sit down and read 50 pages at once without any real issue. Now, what I've noticed is that although I've maintained some benefits from these eye exercises, I can tell that my eyes are stronger and function better than they used to. If I'm not doing them regularly, I lose the more obvious benefits, like being able to just read a book easily. So it's something that I want to return to more consistently in the future. And actually this year I hope to visit a vision therapist who can analyse the functional problems in the eye and develop and suggest a course of exercises to correct them. Interestingly, there's actually a form of attention deficit disorder which is entirely due to these kinds of issues in the eyes, to do with tracking and focus. I mean, look, although if you manage to recover from ME-CFS, it would seem feasible that these problems with the eyes could improve or even resolve. At the same token, if you can actually improve the eye functionality now, I think that could actually help, because it's another stressor. If you are struggling to read, if you're struggling to engage with websites and you're finding it difficult, this is another stressor on the system every day. And if you can actually improve that stressor, you are at least taking one load off the overall burdens and helping your nervous system and brain to have an easier time of it, and therefore you can reduce the stress load and encourage healing from this quite sort of unusual angle. So that's it for this video. I'm very, very interested to hear your experience in relation to this. As I say, it's not talked about very much, so I would be very interested to hear if this is a problem that you have struggled with. Have you found ways of improving it? And I will see you in the next video.